The smoke moves across the rock face in slow, gray sheets. It is May 1945, the Maeda Escarpment on the island of Okinawa, a ridge of coral and limestone roughly 400 feet high that the men fighting there have started calling Hacksaw Ridge. The name fits. The 77th Infantry Division has taken the top. They have held it against counterattacks that come in waves, mostly at night. By morning, the ground is scattered with the wounded and the dead. The order comes, fall back. The situation is not survivable. Men move toward the rope nets that hang down the face of the escarpment, the only way down. The men with rifles go. The men who can walk go. One man stays. He moves through the smoke, bent low, checking the ground around him. He carries medical equipment. He carries rope. He does not carry a rifle. He has never carried one, not in training, not crossing the Pacific, not on any day of fighting that brought him to this ridge. His name is Desmond Doss. He is 26 years old. He is not leaving. And what is about to happen nearly didn't happen at all. Desmond Doss was born in Lynchburg, Virginia in 1919. He grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist household, and the faith was not abstract. It was practical and specific. The Sabbath observed on Saturday, no meat, and a conviction rooted in his reading of the commandments. He could not take a human life, not in self-defense, not in war, not under any circumstances he could imagine. When Pearl Harbor happened, Doss did not resist service. He wanted to serve. He was willing to go to the front. He would do everything a soldier does, be present, run toward the wounded, work under fire, except carry a weapon. He applied to be a combat medic. The Army said no. Then it said no again. Then it tried to find other ways to make him leave. What followed would take months and leave marks that stayed with him long after the war. What followed in training was sustained and deliberate. His fellow soldiers found the refusal insulting. Here was a man who expected others to protect him with weapons he wouldn't touch. Some went beyond words. He was pressured to quit repeatedly. He was mocked for the Sabbath, mocked for praying at night. His commanding officers formally attempted to have him removed from service on psychiatric grounds. The logic was simple. A man who refused to carry a weapon in wartime must be unfit for service. The attempt failed. He kept a small Bible. He carried it everywhere. He did not quit. Legally, the Army had no ground to stand on. He was a conscientious objector who was also willing to serve in a combat role, willing to go to the front, willing to face what everyone else faced. He completed training. He deployed with the 77th Infantry Division, Leyte first, then Guam, then the spring of 1945, and then Okinawa. The men who had spent months trying to break him were on the same ship. None of them knew yet what was waiting at the end of it. The Battle of Okinawa began April 1st, 1945. Japan defended the island as if the war depended on it, because it did. Close enough to the Japanese mainland to serve as a staging point for any Allied invasion. It was held with everything Japan had left. By the time the campaign ended in late June, it had become one of the costliest engagements of the entire Pacific War on both sides. The Maeda Escarpment was the ground the 77th needed. Exposed approaches, no shelter at the top, counterattacks coming at night, continuous, without let-up. The Americans called it Hacksaw Ridge because the fighting there looked like what the name suggests, back and forth, brutal, grinding, inch by inch. The 77th pushed up in May. They took the ridge. They held it through the night. By morning, the ground was scattered with the wounded and the dead, and the counterattacks were not finished, and the position could not be held without reinforcements that were not coming. The order came down to pull back. Somewhere between 75 and 100 wounded men were still at the top. Nobody below knew exactly what Desmond Doss was about to do. He moved across the rock, found a wounded man, dragged or carried him to the edge. He had prepared a method, a looping knot, sometimes called a bowline on a bite, that allowed him to lower a man down the face of the escarpment alone. He had practiced it before. He had thought through exactly this scenario. He lowered the first man down. The men at the bottom watched him go back. Then he went back, found another, brought him to the edge, lowered him down, then went back again. The ground was under intermittent fire. Japanese forces on the far side of the ridge were active. He was alone, without a weapon, moving across terrain that had just forced his entire unit to retreat. He sent another man down, turned back, found another, again and again and again. He said later that he kept praying to save one more, just one more. Each trip back was its own decision made in full knowledge of what the ground was like. The Army's official estimate, 75 men brought to the edge and lowered to safety. Some accounts place the number higher, none place it lower. The men waiting at the bottom had watched the whole thing. Some of them had spent months in training trying to drive him out. The Medal of Honor ceremony took place on October 12, 1945. President Truman placed it around his neck. The citation describes May 5th and what came after. A later engagement in which Doss was wounded by a grenade, gave up his stretcher to a more critically injured man, and walked under fire to reach aid on his own. He was eventually evacuated with a shattered arm. The ceremony was formal. The language was the language of official recognition. What mattered more was something that had happened before any of it. During the Okinawa campaign, before operations on Saturdays, the men of the 77th had begun waiting for Doss to finish his prayers before moving out. Not an order, not a regulation, something the unit had decided on its own. The same men, the same prayers they had mocked. He had earned something no citation could fully describe. But what that recognition cost him was a different story entirely. Doss came home with damaged hearing, serious injuries, and tuberculosis contracted during his time in the Pacific. The recovery was long and at points uncertain. He spent time in veterans' hospitals well into the post-war years, fighting the effects of a war that had been over for some time before his body let him forget it. He did not seek attention. When he spoke about his service, the picture was consistent across decades of interviews. He had not believed he was doing something extraordinary. He believed he was doing what he was supposed to do, that he had been placed on that ridge for exactly that purpose. The faith that had made him a target in training was the same faith he had operated from on the escarpment. He lived until 2006. He was 87 years old. The 2016 film Hacksaw Ridge brought his story to a wide audience. It takes liberties, but the core of it, the man, the ridge, the decision to stay, the number of men lowered down, is grounded in the documented record. The documented record needs no embellishment. People who hear this story for the first time often ask the same question. How does a man without a weapon survive that ground? The answer is that he didn't always escape unharmed. He was wounded multiple times. He was on the same exposed terrain as everyone else, under the same fire, without the means others had to return it. What he had was something that training could not install and orders could not produce. He had arrived at a position about what he believed, about what he would and would not do, and he had held it. Through the mockery, through the psychiatric discharge attempts, through months of pressure designed specifically to break him, he had not moved. By the time he reached that ridge, the hard part was already behind him. The decision on that ridge was not made on that ridge. It had been made years earlier, in private, and carried forward through everything that came after it. When the moment arrived, the smoke, the wounded men, the nets hanging down the face of the escarpment, the rest of the unit already gone, he already knew what he was going to do. He had always known.